Verse 18 reads like this in the Good News Bible. She knows the value of everything she makes and works late into the night. There's an amazing woman who gets up before dawn and works late into night. Of course, probably could do that in her younger days, and as she grows old, it may have been different, but her attitude in her youth anyway was that she was not lazily lolling around in bed till late in the morning, but would get up early and get on with the job and work late into night. And then further, verse 19, this is referring to the sewing machine. It says, she stretches out her hands to the sewing machine, and her hands grasp the spindle. Again, her hands. She's working with her hands. It's amazing. It's quite a contrast when you read in the book of Isaiah chapter 3. Paul says, the Lord says, Isaiah, these daughters of Zion, they walk so delicately and on their toes and with their dancing steps and their earrings bobbing. And we could say that today, all these ladies today with so many inches of their midriff showing under their blouses and all this evil that there is in daughters of Zion, terrible, and all this delicate way of going. Yeah, this is quite a contrast to what we see here in Proverbs chapter 31. Quite a contrast. Here's one who's working with her hands at home. She's not going around all this delicate type of way out in the world. No? Why is she working so much with her hands? It's not just for herself. It says in verse 20, she does something for the poor. It says in the Living Bible, verse 19 and 20 reads like this in the Living Bible. She sews clothes for the poor. She's stitching. Her hands go out to the sewing machine to stitch for the poor and generously gives to the needy. It's not just selfishly. She's concerned. Her hands are stretched out to help the poor. She earns all that she can. She saves all that she can. And she gives all that she can. Wonderful woman, really a wholehearted spiritual sister. And like Solomon says, hard to find. But there are a few. Verse 21 reads like this in the Living Bible. She has no fear of winter for her household, for she has made warm clothes for all her family. She's got forethought. Winter's coming. I need some warm clothes for the family. And she's made it with her own hands. She's worked with her own hands and cared for the winter. Verse 22, she makes bedspreads. And in the Living Bible it says with the finest tapestry. That means she's got a sense of beauty about her. She gathers up all the leftover bits of cloth from her stitching and stitches it all together and makes a bedspread. And you think it's such an expensive thing. Actually, it's just the leftover bits of cloth which she got together and made a beautiful tapestry bedspread out of it. Think of her attitude, not to waste anything and to use everything profitably and attractiveness. And what about her own dress? It says here that her clothing is fine linen and purple, like the clothing of the bride in the New Testament, in simplicity. Her clothing is not gold ornaments and earrings and all this stupid stuff. Fine linen, simplicity and modesty in her dress. And she makes it herself, it says. In other words, she's careful that some stupid tailor does not put on the latest fashion onto her clothes. Of course, if she doesn't know how to stitch herself, she'd tell the tailor specifically, I don't want any of these rotten latest fashions, please, in the way you stitch my clothes. I want it like this. She's very careful about the way she gets her clothes stitched. You see, this is the type of woman you young people should look for. And verse 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. And that means that because of the way she has lived, she has relieved her husband of all his household work so that he can do his task in the office. Today it's not the gates, it's the office. It's the office you work in. Her husband is a relaxed man in the office because he hasn't come to work with tension on his mind because he got a yelling and a shelling from his wife in the morning. He's relaxed and his work is so efficient because she has made it so easy for him to do his work, and he prospers in his work in his office or whatever he does, whether he's a leading citizen there or Gates means leadership in those days. And the woman made him a leader. Behind every great leader, spiritual leader, there is a great woman. She has made her husband to be known because of her wisdom at home. In contrast, we can say there's many a wife who has been a hindrance to her husband's ministry. Many a wife, unfortunately, who've been hindrances to their husband's ministry. Verse 24. She makes linen garments and sells them. I told you about her earnings. This is how she earns. She doesn't leave her home, but she makes linen garments and sells them. She sells things from her garden, and she sells the clothes she stitches, and supplies belts to the tradesmen. She contacts tradesmen and earns something and supplements her husband's income because her husband is not a millionaire. They're simple people, poor people. So she knows that she's got to do something to make sure that ends meet, that we don't become beggars or get into debt. Verse 25, she's called here a woman of strength, even though a weaker sex, a woman of strength and of dignity. Her clothing are strength, this inner spiritual strength, and dignity means she doesn't go around gossiping and chit-chatting useless stuff and foolish jokes and jesting and all that. There's a dignity about her. Even though she's young, there's a dignity about her. This is not talking about an old 70-year-old woman. This is talking about a young 20, 25-year-old who's got some dignity about her, instead of going around like all the other loose girls, chatting and gossiping and cracking useless jokes. There's a dignity about her. And she's not afraid of old age, and she's not afraid of the future. She smiles at the future means she looks into the future. When she's old, she says, I'm not afraid of that. I've lived a good life and I'm young for the glory of God, and she's not afraid of that. She's not afraid of the whole future. She's not afraid of inflation. She's not afraid of anything for her family, because she's using each day for the glory of God in this way. She looks to the future with confidence. And here's another wonderful thing. Verse 26. When she opens her mouth, it's not gossip, it's wisdom. And the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Wisdom and kindness are guiding all her speech. Some people have kindness but no wisdom. But it's a wonderful thing when you have wisdom and kindness in your speech. And think of a woman who's got that gentle wisdom. As it says in the Good News Bible, she speaks with a gentle wisdom. Now I'll tell you something. Listen carefully, young men. Usually, women who are very efficient and capable are also very hard-tongued. It's very difficult to find a hard-working, capable woman who also knows how to speak with gentle wisdom. People who are very efficient are usually very domineering. They don't know submission, but not this one. She's got rough hands because she works with them, and a soft tongue. The people in the world have got soft hands and a rough tongue. Now don't make that mistake of getting a woman with soft hands and a rough tongue. Rough hands and a soft tongue. What a blessing it is. That's the rule for her speech. A gentle wisdom. The Living Bible says kindness and wisdom are the rule for her speech, for everything she says. That means there's no nagging. No nagging of the husband, no nagging of the children. Gentle wisdom. Verse 27, she looks after the ways of her household, means that she looks after her children. She ensures that rotten magazines don't come into the house, that the children don't get into useless habits. She looks after the ways of her household. And she does not eat the bread of idleness, means that she's not lazy. She's watchful all the time, instructing her children, disciplining her children when they are using words which they've picked up in school which are not proper to speak. She's looking after the ways of her household. What a woman this is. Her children rise up and bless her. One day, children of such a mother will stand up and say, thank you, Lord, that you gave me such a mother. Her husband also will one day, even if he doesn't appreciate her value sufficiently in the beginning, will one day rise up and say, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. You are the best. And I believe that Every brother can say that about his wife, because God gives us what we deserve. Now, as you listen to all this, brothers, you can think, oh, I wish my wife were like this. And then you got it all wrong. Because this is not an exhortation for you to wish your wife were like this if you're already married. But think of what you could be yourself as a husband. God has given you the type of wife you deserve. And if you didn't get a better one, it's because you yourself don't deserve a better one. I mean, you yourself are not so spiritual. Why should God be so unrighteous as to give you such a spiritual wife? You got to be wholehearted in order to get a wholehearted wife. Everybody would like a wholehearted wife. There are a lot of immoral men in the world who like pure women for their wives. It's highly unrighteous. It'd be highly unrighteous for an unspiritual man to say, oh God, give me a really spiritual wife. God would be very unrighteous if he answered that prayer. No, God gives us the wife we deserve. What's the secret of her life? Verse 30. It's not her beauty, it's not her charm. Charm is deceitful. Beauty is vain. But she fears God. That's the secret of her life. The fear of God with which the book of Proverbs began. The beginning of wisdom ends with a woman, not a man, but a woman who fears God. And it says here in verse 31, the closing verse, give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates, means praise her publicly. She deserves to be praised publicly in the gate. She deserves the respect of everyone. She deserves recognition, honor from people. Such a wife. Now as you sisters look at this passage, you can see a goal there which you may not have attained to, you may not have reached. But you can set that before you and say, Lord, I want to read and read and reread and reread and meditate on this passage to see the type of woman that you want me to be. That all my explanation of the doctrine and knowledge of the new and living way doesn't even account for one verse in this whole section. But it's gentleness and wisdom on my tongue and hard work with my hands so that my hands become rough with hard work. That's the mark of the woman whom God calls one who is worth more than all the riches of the world. Such a woman can make whoever she marries an extremely rich man. And whatever her husband earns, even if it's very little, they'll have no problem in making ends meet because she has wisdom. Think of that challenge, brothers and sisters. For those of us who are going to be married, to think of finding a woman like this.